অর্থনীতি চাকা অনুষ্ঠান থেকে আপনাদের সবাইকে সুস্বাগতম। In today's program, we will talk about the climate change financing options for Bangladesh. There's different funds which are available for the climate change adaptation and mitigation measures. As you know, that Bangladesh is one of the seriously affected countries in this regard. So to talk on this subject, we have here with us today Dr. Ellen Goldstein, the country director of the World Bank. And we also have with us a climate change and adaptation and mitigation measure expert, Dr. Ainul Nishad, also the Vice Chancellor of BRAC University. So welcome to both of you to our program. To start the discussion, I would like to ask Ellen here is, can you tell us about the current status of the financing options for climate change, mitigation and adaptation measures, and especially the kind of funds that are available from the World Bank for such things?
Thank you very much. Yes, I think Bangladesh is fortunate to be receiving funds from a variety of sources to address climate change adaptation. On the one hand, of course, government has set up their own climate change trust fund, which I'm sure Dr. Nishat can speak about. But from the side of external partners, we can, of course, talk about the Bangladesh Climate Change Resilience Fund, which is a fund into which we now have 5 different development partners contributing resources, now totaling about $115 to $120 million.
Right.
But in addition to these funds, which have come in specifically in support of government's climate change strategy and action plan, many of the development partners have for quite some time been financing activities that seek to reduce Bangladesh's vulnerability to climate change.
Okay.
For example, the World Bank, my organization, already has in place about $500 million worth of investments in
roughly $500 million.
About $500 million. Okay. In areas like water management, coastal embankments, disaster risk management. So there are quite a large amount of money, and we're looking in the future actually to ramp that up significantly.
Okay, and these are all available in the immediate term, meaning from now until the next several years.
The $500 million that I just mentioned, these are ongoing programs and projects like the Clean Air and Sustainable Environment Project, like the Emergency Cyclone Recovery Project, which seeks to build shelters and coastal embankments and early warning systems.
Okay.
When I talk about ramping up, over the next 4 years as part of the World Bank's country assistance strategy for Bangladesh, we're looking at about $1.2 billion worth of IDA credits, the soft loans that the World Bank provides, for things like coastal embankment, river training, environmental protection, wildlife conservation, and disaster risk reduction.
Okay, thank you. So now I'd like to come to Dr. Ainul Nishad. So Dr. Goldstein has said that World Bank has this more than $1 billion plan for the climate change programs for Bangladesh. And we know that Bangladesh government also has a $100 million or 700 crore taka fund for that. How do you see that from our national priorities standpoint? Are they sufficient? Are enough being done? Or are we only in the planning stages in this so far?
Thank you. I think I should clear the whole gamut with respect to finance. There are 2 issues. Number one, climate change or climate variability or the impact of climate change, that is something which is not due to something that Bangladesh has done.
Of course.
This is what the developed countries have done, and therefore since 1992, there is commitment by the developed countries that they would sort of take care of the adaptation needs. So the money that would be coming in the form of grant, not a loan. So that's a big debate. And towards that, after long debate in Copenhagen in 2009, the world promised to mobilize $30 billion, $10 billion.
This is for the total
for the whole
global
world.
outlay.
So you must understand this particular issue.
Okay.
So this $30 billion, $10 billion each for 2010, 11, and 12.
I see.
Of which one year is gone.
Right. Okay.
So in December, I will give you the exact date, 10th December 2010,
right.
in Cancun, the developed countries did say how they are mobilizing this $30 billion.
Okay.
Now, since the global mechanism for distribution of this money, who gets what, is not ready as of today, therefore, most of the bilateral donors are moving it through, most of the donors are moving it through bilateral donors and, mechanism and others. Okay. And also in the process, the expectation is that this fund would be raised to $100 billion every year on top of the normal Overseas Development Assistance Fund, ODA normal fund. And that would be from 2020. And
from 2020
onwards, every year, $100 billion in addition to whatever is happening in the world.
$100 billion.
I see. So the issue is who is going to manage it. So right now, World Bank has been given the mandate to be the manager of this fund. And earlier in 1992, we had Global Environment Facility, where also a few $1 billion were moved. And it was that time it was not only managed but controlled by World Bank through another organization called GEF, Global Environment Facility. Okay. So this is one side of the story. So huge global funds are expected to be mobilized, but how that would be transferred to the various countries, how that would be utilized, there are lots of questions. There are lots of questions with respect to capacity, questions with respect to accountability, questions with respect to transparency and others. Okay. Now, while the whole world is debating how much money would be needed, how it would be mobilized, Government of Bangladesh took initiative of putting some of their own money into some mechanism. And in that mechanism, the government has already put not 700 crore, but 1,400 crore. So first 700 crore was put in 2009 by the caretaker government, and then another 700 crore by the present government. I see. So it's 1,400 crore that is in equity. I see. And for that, the Parliament couple of months back passed a law to manage this particular fund, which is called Bangladesh Climate Change Trust Fund Act of 2010. That's right. And what they have done is this is a trust fund. So it is not a part of the normal development budget. Okay. So 2/3 of the money would go for certain activities. And to my understanding, I'm not directly involved, but to my understanding, about 40, 42, 43 government projects, or maybe 23 government projects have been selected for funding. And from NGOs, another 30, 40, but much smaller size projects have been selected. 2/3 of the money would be distributed. So I'm hoping next year it also another $700 crore, $100 million minimum would come. And the rest 1/3 is put on a fixed deposit so that with that money the management can go on. I see. Now to support Bangladesh's initiative, and which is unique, no other country in the world has done that. The donors have bilaterally come out with support. Some funds. So it started with DFID. I think the last to join is the Swiss and European Union, and I think Denmark and other countries. Sweden and collectively they have put about $120+ million. Now please note, Bangladesh government has mobilized $200 million of their own money, and all the rich bilateral countries have given $120 million. And they have requested World Bank to be the fiduciary manager, the custodian of this fund, and they would be doing that. So we'll come back to more on this. We need to take a short commercial break, and we'll be back shortly. Please be with us. Thank you. আমাদের সাথে থাকার জন্য ধন্যবাদ। আমরা কথা বলছিলাম ওয়ার্ল্ড ব্যাংক কান্ট্রি ডিরেক্টর ডক্টর এলেন গোল্ডস্টিন এবং ব্র্যাক ইউনিভার্সিটির ভাইস চ্যান্সেলর ডক্টর আইনুন নিশাতের সাথে জলবায়ু পরিবর্তন ফান্ডিং সংক্রান্ত বিষয় নিয়ে কথা বলছিলাম। Let me go back to you, Dr. Ainun Nishat. You are telling us about the global funding that's supposed to happen for countries that are affected, such as Bangladesh. And also, Bangladesh government has also mobilized funds to take care of this adaptation and mitigation measures. So while you wanted to say something more on that, while you do that, I would also like to request that you also tell us which funding is more important for us. It is that the climate change and how to adapt to climate change, all the expenses related to adaptation, is a global responsibility. Right. and they have admitted that. So there is no debate over that. Question is how much, in which mechanism, and where.
Right.
And that is why I indicate that huge funds would be available very soon. And the point I was driving at, that we must immediately build our capacity.
Okay.
We must immediately set up our system, because any country is not going to give you money just without subsequent monitoring. We just be sure that this money is being used productively and effectively and for the purpose for which it is collected. So this is a big question. The global money, more money is going towards mitigation.
Okay.
And then there are a third source of money, which is the CDM fund, Clean Development Mechanism Fund. And we are very ineffective as of today in getting money from that source. So that is also where we need capacity building.
Okay.
Moving back to the other point, our urgent need is on adaptation.
Okay.
And for that, I can immediately...
Can you give some examples of adaptation measures already being done?
Bangladesh is one of the countries which is already ready for many of the disasters, like the flood, the drought, and the storm surge and cyclone. But if you see in Cedar and Isla, in the southwestern part, the dikes are overtopped. So these dikes were constructed in the 60s, and they were very good till, say, 2007, so for 50 years.
Right.
Now they are failing. So we need to have big investment on
rebuilding them.
Rebuilding the dikes, the flood embankments, the cyclone shelters, the flood shelters.
Right.
Go in a big way for river training, the riverbank erosion project. We have to go in a big way for further development of irrigation facilities, urban drainage. Dhaka city is in a big risk under climate change. So I think over the next 10 years, we can easily consume around $20 billion. But if it is for adaptation, this should be in the form of, you can use the word compensation or a grant.
Right.
But now we have to mix it up with the development activities. That is why Ellen was talking about. Mix up with the low interest rate
development programs that they have. Right. Okay, thank you. We'll go to the audience for a question now. Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. At first, I'd like to thanks to give me such opportunity to ask a question about such important issue. My question is, what kind of business opportunities do we have due to these climate changes? The fund is coming in our country. Thank you.
Well, I think it's the kind of thing where almost any time there is external funding coming into the country, whether it's in the form of aid resources or in the form of climate change compensation resources, obviously all of these activities will generate investments in the local economy, for which there are many business opportunities, whether it's civil works or the provision of services, consultancies, et cetera. So I guess you're all students of business and finance, and we would expect to see you engaged in these activities in a few more years.
Okay, thank you.
But I have a point.
Right,
you see, Bangladesh being an LDC country, least developed countries, we are not required to go for mitigation. But the government's present position is that if we are provided with finance and technological support, we would definitely like to go for mitigational efforts. Okay. And this is where anyone involved in business studies, anyone involved in setting up industries would have a big role to play. Okay. As for example, the government is going for power stations. I mean, we need huge amount of energy. But will this power be produced in an environment-friendly way, in a green way? Answer is no. Unless we get the finance and the technological support on that. So if you take care to study the CDM opportunity, millions of dollars are waiting. So if you are employed by say business house or an industrial house, and if you can link up with this CDM mechanism, you can bring sufficient
CDM
money.
Meaning the
clean development mechanism. So
right.
How you can cut down on greenhouse gas emissions. So you have to gain knowledge on that, and then you should be able to apply your business skills in this process.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to take another short commercial break, and then we'll come back. Please stay with us. Thank you. ধন্যবাদ আমাদের সাথে থাকার জন্য. Now we are back to the program discussing climate change financing for Bangladesh, and we are discussing this with Dr. Ellen Goldstein of the World Bank and Dr. Ainu Nishat of VC Brack University. So let me come back to you, Dr. Ellen Goldstein. Dr. Ainu Nishat already mentioned the overall elaborate plans for the developed countries to contribute funds for least developed countries that are affected by the climate change. And also the initiative that the Bangladesh government has taken, and he has already mentioned that we are very unique in that respect, the first country to do so, and mobilizing our own resources to take up programs. Now, how do you think this can be complementary, and how do you think the world community can learn from this example? Or is there something that Bangladesh can also learn from the practices in other countries?
Well, I'm sure there's scope for learning in both directions, but I think it is very important to recognize the global leadership role that Bangladesh has taken thus far in being one of the first countries to produce a climate change strategy and action plan, which really clearly lays out what are the priorities for both adaptation and mitigation. And secondly, while all of the international debate and there are many controversial issues are being worked out, not waiting around. You're a highly affected country, and there's no time like the present to start working on these very serious issues. So I think it's very laudable that government has committed funds out of their own resources and has worked within many of the existing mechanisms for channeling funds. And there are many new pilot mechanisms, like there's something called the Pilot Program for Climate Resilience, for example, through which Bangladesh is now accessing another about $110 million working through the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank to implement a program that will focus on exactly the kinds of things that Dr. Nishat was talking about in terms of in increasing the size of the embankments and repairing some of the polders that have been damaged. So it is very laudable that the country is just moving ahead on this. And it may appear that the money is small at the present time, but I think it's excellent that the country is learning from experience and starting to get out there and trying to get results on the ground, because when the big money comes, the country will be in a much better place and will have built some institutional capacity to manage these funds themselves.
Wonderful. So one thing that just as a follow-up to that, you said that the developed countries committed $10 billion a year for 3 years, and 1 year is gone out of that. But out of this $30 billion fund that is supposed to be contributed by the developed countries, as a affected country, what is the notional share of Bangladesh out of that fund that could come to Bangladesh for our adaptation and mitigation measures?
Well, two issues. One, how the fund would be managed, that's being worked out. Second thing, how it will be apportioned or how it will be allocated, that's also being worked out. So one of the approach would be related to some kind of index related to the vulnerability index and other things. But point is that please remember, this is not a problem for Bangladesh only.
No, of course.
This is a problem for all countries of the world. The developed countries may have the capacity to cope with that. If you talk to Ellen, I'm sure her hometown is now under 5 feet of snow, somewhere in Wisconsin in northern America. And they are in some parts, they're facing a snow, depth of snow which they have never experienced. Find it in Australia what they're facing.
So what are you saying is that this has not yet been worked out yet?
But since, let me rephrase, the $30 billion for the first 3 years, the developed countries have already committed $32 billion. So the commitment has been made, but 1 year has gone. So instead of waiting for the mechanisms to be finalized, the countries are pushing bilaterally. And by studying what is happening in the website, informations are there, we are kind of disappointed because most of the money is going for mitigation and transfer of technology and others. And again, the main beneficiary are the countries which have better capacity. That is why I harped on capacity building. You have to develop a proposal in a form that will be acceptable to the donor, the giver. So the main beneficiary, again, I see is going to be China and India and Brazil and South Africa and Malaysia and Indonesia, the countries which have better preparation. So my point is that we have worked out, this is the Bangladesh Climate Change Strategy and Action Plan, 2009. This has been gazetted.
Okay.
Now, the reason it has been gazetted, not only approved by the cabinet, means that any activity on climate change adaptation, mitigation, capacity building should follow this guideline.
Okay. Wonderful.
So this is an excellent strategy document.
Okay.
But now it has to be developed into programs and projects, and the donor must be satisfied that this fund would be properly and effectively utilized. So we have to concentrate on that preparation.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to our next question from the audience. Okay, please.
Thank you, sir. This is Sanjita Firdaus, and I'm a student of BBA, major in economics in AIB. Now, my question is how Bangladesh can leverage its trust fund to improve in short term its effectiveness and responses to such type of climates, and how they can prevent the massive death tolls.
I think it's important to recognize that over the past, say, 20 to 25 years, Bangladesh has actually done a much better job at reducing the risks of disasters. That's not to say that you don't suffer from natural disasters. They are coming, and they may come with even greater frequency and greater intensity because of the effects of climate change. But the country has been learning the lessons of its own experience, and I know that as a partner that has put many millions of dollars into this question of disaster risk reduction, what we can see statistically is that the use of multi-purpose shelters is very useful in protecting populations. But even more important, it's funny because one tends to think that big infrastructure is always the answer. One of the most important aspects are these early warning systems, and just having communities organized and sensitized to the need to seek shelter and to do what is necessary.
That's right.
And this is often a question of simply building local capacity in governments, and so the question of decentralization and local government support is very important. It's also a question of the spread of telecommunications technology in the country, which has, of course, revolutionized communications in Bangladesh over the past 20 years.
Okay, thank you. Well, actually, we have run out of time, so I thank both of you, Dr. Ellen Goldstein and Dr. Aino Nishat, for coming to our show. It has been a very fruitful discussion, and I want to acknowledge our partners, American International University Bangladesh, and our media partners, Financial Express. And I want to thank the in-studio audience, and again, of course, our guests for a wonderful show tonight. Thank you.